Yeah, and are we expecting the other two?
Charles said he was okay for this time.
He did.
I called to confirm that he knew that it was here, and he said he has a pressing matter that he's handling, so he
Okay.
won't make it today.
Okay. And Kendra,
She said she's not in Independence.
Okay.
That's all she said.
okay. So she won't be here.
So what does that mean?
It's okay, we have a quorum.
Okay.
That's what we were trying to figure out, is if we have a quorum or not.
Okay,
We
that's
have to
what I
have
was.
three of us.
Yeah, okay, that's what my question is. We got to have 3. Okay.
Yeah,
So that's your only bet.
That's the only time I can go.
yeah. If you need to go
Okay,
within-
noted.
Yeah, exactly. If you have to go again within the next hour, then probably you've had too much coffee.
Probably haven't had enough. But truth.
There you go. I don't do caffeine. Talk about hard thing. Okay.
I do appreciate it. I mean, you know I may need some for you too. I know you are, but I don't remember the entire staff.
All right, I will do that next time.
Is this live? Is this live already? Because
So-
it's
If
green.
it's green, it's live.
Yeah.
If it's bright,
button.
it's live.
So it's got tape. Oh, there we
Yeah, so-
go. There we go. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, and so, as Steve mentioned, you won't notice when you talk into it in the room because there's no overhead. It's
Oh.
only for the streaming.
Okay.
So once we start recording, if you want to whisper under your breath, remember that it might be picked up.
Clear your
Okay.
anger.
No more bathroom breaks and no more talking to myself.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Well, you can talk to yourself, but
Just not out loud.
to yourself. Yes. That would be the
So
only
noted.
thing.
So noted.
Okay. Wondered if Bridget was going to be here today too. but I guess not.
Arthur, did you practice here in Independence?
Part-time the last 5 years.
So a general or
Family physician.
family?
So, yeah, I was at one of the medical care only clinics.
Yeah. So you've seen a lot of changes, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to print it, and then I was like, oh my God, I got to drive.
Those are my prayers.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Kirksville? Is part of-
Well, it's
Yeah,
20 years.
20.
Oh, yeah, I know that area. Greencastle and,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Jamie.
I know.
Oh, yes. All right, now we're ready to roll. Okay, calling the meeting to order at 11:05. Myself, Cindy, and Arthur are here today. And our first item of business is approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I don't know if this is the time to ask, but my name is misspelled
Yes.
throughout.
So if we can get a motion.
Okay.
If
I make a motion that my name,
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to accept the minutes.
Okay.
I need a second.
Second.
Very good. Now, discussion. Please, go ahead.
sorry.
No, no.
So my name is misspelled, just for the record.
Yeah.
It's spelled Troutman. So if it can be corrected, I appreciate that. Sorry.
And that is in
The minutes.
2 or 3 places.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. And then I have a few other suggestions. The additional present, I would, just in general, I would take that out because when we like have a hearing or something, we're going to have a list of all kinds of people who are here, which is fine if we want to always list them. Up to you. Like for what we have now, it's not a big deal, but when we have a hearing and we're taking minutes, I don't think we want to pass around a sheet.
I think that can be left up to the person taking minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up to them.
Okay, all right. Then I would ask that either we, like when it says Laura Dominic, comma, chair each time, or, Arthur Freeland, comma, board member, we don't need to redo say that every time, you know what I mean? Because it's above.
Again, it's up to the person taking the minutes. I think it's at their discretion.
Okay. Then under new business, every time it says motion the matter to hearing, I think it should be to a hearing, right? Because we're motioning to move it to a hearing, not to move to hearing. That doesn't make
I'll
sense.
defer to legal on that one.
I think either one works. I think in the context of having personnel board hearings, we understand that it's a hearing. I think you could be cool either way.
Okay. I just got to reading it and I was like, move to hearing, and that didn't resonate with me. So, that's fine. Under proposed, so on the second page, drug and alcohol policy, there's an extra comma after Cindy, but I think that what you meant to put after the comma was board member. So either we can remove the comma or we can put in board member, whichever there. That's all. Anything you have, Arthur?
You're going to beat yourself up if you keep editing.
I will keep editing until the day is done, because these go into public record. So, do you have any comments on the
No.
minutes? Okay, very good. Then all in favor of accepting the minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Next, we're going to move on to the nepotism policy. If you could please be looking at this sheet that she just handed out. One second. I tried to kind of clean up some things and make some suggestions. It was starting to get really heavy with a lot of red marks, so, okay. So, one thing, so just in general, we've seen this be what it has been for decades, and then was changed to take out the directly supervised, and now we're back to directly supervised, and then some cleanup stuff. Is there a reason, other than just cleaning this up because of those flowchart thingies that were all kind of goofy and everything, are we really trying to change some policy here because of
Yes.
something that happened?
No, I don't change policy based on things that happen. That's not why policy should be changed,
Okay.
in my opinion.
Okay,
Policy should be an overarching policy based on the way an organization should be run.
Okay.
I never, ever, just for the record, want to write or dictate policy or contract based on a situation or a reason.
okay,
In HR, that is never a good way to run
good.
human resources. So
Yep.
to answer your question, the answer is no.
Okay. So can you explain, how can I word it? I'm struggling with my thought to how to word the
Can I
question.
explain why I'm doing it?
Yeah, I mean,
So it was directed to me when I took the position on
uh-huh.
to review and update the personnel policies and procedures manual. So that is what
Right.
I'm doing.
Yes, that's what we're all doing. Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question, because, and I'm new to all this, but so this is the way it was, and the red is the changes that you're asking to do?
Correct.
And then, because you speak of the word direct, it came in and it came back. So,
Yeah, that I'm not, I didn't understand that either, so.
it was, how was the old policy, do we know? It was
Not
direct,
directly supervised.
not directly supervised.
So again, for
Which-
instance, we had a deputy chief and a
Right.
firefighter.
Right. So we're going back to basically not directly supervised, correct?
That was discussed,
Okay.
but now we're back to directly again. This has been over time that this has been discussed.
Okay, so you've just lost me. So we want, now I really am confused. So it used to say not directly supervised. Is that what you're saying?
So it would cause a nepotism issue if someone were directly supervising a relative.
Okay,
That was what it was for a long time.
okay.
Then, back in November, and oops, sorry, my bad about my phone. And, through discussions and everything, last year, the word directly came out of there.
Okay,
And then that's when we found out that there are departments who are like, if you say that supervise means anybody in
right.
chief down, for instance, just in the fire department, they're going to have to get rid of, 8 people or more.
Right.
Because you can't, usually a firefighter can't be a police officer. It's not like an accountant can move from an accountant over in this department to an accountant in that department type thing. So we moved back to saying, no, the issue is if you directly supervise someone, that is a nepotism issue. Now, if something happens emergency-wise,
Right.
and it has to happen, then we have the safety net that says, we're going to investigate it. Because you should have gone to every length to ensure that A and B, who are relatives, did not supervise each other, but we had an emergency, and now you've got to document it.
Well, this is the first time the board has had this conversation about nepotism. So,
We talked, okay, go ahead.
at least at this level, we've had conversations with the coalition and with legal, right, to discuss, but regardless, the issue is we want to make sure that, just like we were talking about last week, we want to make sure that we're making it comfortable with all in the groups, right, to make sure that we're not losing any personnel necessarily, but we're also making sure that we have some legitimate content that covers everybody. So, so that's the hope here, right? So we want to make sure that that all plays in line with what the policy reads, and that we have enough wiggle room to do so. That's the goal.
Right.
With what
Yeah,
the
and we
nepotism
discussed some of
policy
this at
says.
the last meeting.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
And it was presented to us last November, but we didn't get to it in formal
Correct.
discussion.
We didn't get to it
So
for
we've had-
discussion.
So I have different, like this printout, that printout, this printout, we've had changes, so, okay. So I'm going to go through my proposed suggestions, and we can, just take a section at a time. So, first of all, I recommend that we move the definitions to the number 1 slot under nepotism. Definitions need to be before you start using the words. So for instance, if where we currently have the definitions, there's a place above it that refers to relative. Well, relative hasn't been defined until after. So the definitions need to be the number 1 thing, so that when you start reading into a policy, you know what these words mean in this policy. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes, that makes sense.
And that's just a movement, okay? Then also under definitions, personally, and I'm not married to this, no pun intended, my suggestion is we only have the definition of affinity, I'm going to call it consang because I can't ever say the word right, because the charter refers to the affinity and consang again, and the chart here, the table says that. So in our definition, we just need to define for people, what does consang mean? So it means blood relationship between people from common ancestor to include parent, and then list all those things out. Or affinity refers to relationship who are not related by blood, such as related by law or marriage. So we have 2 things, and then we have the definition of relative. So these are the, this is how you can be a relative by blood. Here's one you can be by law, and then relative, any person associated by affinity or consag within the 4th degree, which is what it says in the charter. And we can take out that section about personal relationship, because that's not covered in the charter. We don't talk about that anywhere else here.
But
So we don't need that section.
I'm not sure we want to refer to what's in the charter with relation to the personnel policy. I don't know, and stop me if I'm wrong, but those are two separate things that, this is a working document that relates to how we handle personnel matters. I'm not sure we have to dictate based on charter necessarily.
Well, number 2 says, all hiring decisions shall comply with Charter Section 5.1 nepotism.
I will say, before we get into the discussion about the charter, that as of right now, the charter will not have the nepotism position parts in it. We are currently in the process of revising it, and the election is in August, so then we will know for sure. But as of right now, the charter does not, the revised charter that people are voting on in August does not have the provisions about nepotism in there. Now, that doesn't mean they won't be put into city code, and nepotism in general is prohibited by the Constitution, so it's not that we're getting rid of those provisions, it's just that they're being pulled out of the charter.
When you say the Constitution is,
That's where this comes from, really, is that the Missouri Constitution says that...
Missouri, okay.
Yes, that all, yes, not the United States.
I was like, I
The
don't know
Missouri
what you're talking
Constitution
about.
says that no public employee or official can appoint somebody within the 4th degree
Okay,
or name
so we're
somebody.
going to then,
Public official.
Correct.
Or employee,
Or employee.
which would cover, the city can't hire anybody in the 4th degree like that when somebody is the public official or the employee. They can't, it says,
So you're saying, now, just for clarification, you're saying, I'm an employee, I'm up here, I can't hire somebody, like a relative, but somebody else can hire someone that's my relative?
yes, you cannot appoint or name that
Right,
person.
okay,
right,
okay.
and that's where
That's where
number
the-
2 is nepotism in hiring decisions. So we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if that change is going to get voted in or out.
Correct.
So are we going to keep language about that here then, and then turn around and have to amend it again after August if people vote on it or not?
Well, it will still be, yes, any references to the charter in general will need to be updated because section numbers are changing, some of them. But we don't, whether something goes into city code or not, we haven't fully fleshed out yet, but this is part of the Constitution, so we can't move too much with it.
Okay.
So,
So it is going to stay within the 4th degree?
Yes, that's the standard.
Okay, okay. Okay, so
now I'm really lost.
So let's go back. So let's go back to personal relationships. We don't even talk about that in here. That's not related by affinity. That's not related by blood.
Yes, I think that needs to be removed, because I think that it's very, very, very specific, and, you could have 2 folks that work for the same department that go out and have dinner, and then someone says, oh, they're dating. I think that that's a little too specific. I would remove it, but that would just be my thought.
Because I don't even think that you can, if the Constitution says the nepotism is by law or blood, then a personal relationship is not by law or blood.
It's consanguinity.
Consanguinity.
The C word.
I usually can say yes. Or affinity. So it does include that affinity. It does not define affinity, but it includes.
But we define
that.
affinity.
Correct, but it says or affinity, so it doesn't only have to be by blood. Does that?
So affinity is defined as, refers to the relationship between people who are not related by blood, to include those who are related by law or marriage. That's how we're defining affinity.
Sure.
And there's nothing in there that says if you're dating.
Sure, I agree.
Yeah, so that, to me, that section needs to go out. I don't think we want to get into asking people, are you having a sexual relationship with someone in the department? I don't even know how you even can ask that question without potentially opening up a lot of doors.
That's a lot, there are a lot of policies out there that call for that. I mean, that's typical in HR world. Those policies are put in place consistently in organizations. So this is common.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's common or not, but I I just don't think we should be judging based on that.
It's not a judgment, it's to keep the separation based on, all I'm saying is it's part of policy to keep a separation, right? And again, we can speak more to this, but it's simply just to keep a separation. It's a nepotism issue that is quite common in practice.
Okay, so then, what does the law say? The law says affinity or what?
Consanguinity.
I
Affinity
can't say that
means
word.
relationship.
Okay, so then we're going to need to change the definition of relationship, of affinity, excuse me, because we don't define that in here. We just throw out personal relationship, and it's just sitting out there.
I think it's the wording that I have a hard time with, who's dating, cohabitating, or engaging in an activity. I have an issue with it. I mean, because I know there are going to be people that live together that are not married, that in fact have children together. You know, maybe you put in the word cohabitating somewhere, but I think the dating part is what I have a problem with.
Because there's quite a few issues too, where, you know, we have individuals who have, you know, from an insurance perspective, for example, you know, that.
They add them to the policy.
Correct. So there's a lot of instances,
Right.
especially in the culture we live in now, where individuals aren't married, right?
Right.
But they're, to your point, Board member,
Cohabitating.
they're cohabitating, they're doing things that are family related, but they're not necessarily on paper married or a family. But that is definitely family-like situations where it would relate to this policy, just not based on a paper document. And that it would apply should that piece of paper be in place. So it would relate in all other matters. So
So couldn't we just put the word cohabitate up with affinity and leave out all that other language?
And I'd also be interested to hear how the Missouri Constitution defines affinity, because if it's defined.
It does not.
It does not define it?
No.
And there's no case law or anything?
I'm sure there is. I don't have it at my fingertips.
Because if we're kind of basing, like, the charter obviously was based on the Constitution, then I'd like to see the law or an interpretation of that, so that we have the proper definition of affinity that complies with the state. But go ahead, I'm sorry, she was talking about just taking out.
That's okay.
Just talking about cohabitating.
There's no rigid way to sort that out, because cohabitate could be roommates.
correct, and it
Yeah.
changes consistently.
And that's where,
Whereas you were referring to something that might be considered a common law marriage.
Correct.
But Missouri
Exactly.
doesn't have common law marriage.
It's a term for people that don't have a piece of paper.
Right. So, I mean, I just, in my mind, that when you go to personal relationship, you're being very, very specific. And maybe I'm getting caught up down here in the weeds somehow, but, you know, you might have two people that are kind of just hanging out, and they're not really dating, but somebody comes and says they're dating, and then, well, they shouldn't be in the same department. I mean, I don't know. I just have a problem with the language, the way it's written.
and if there's no piece of paper, I mean, and somebody says, are you engaging in this kind of activity with someone? And they say no, then the answer is no, right? I mean, we're not, unless you're going to do it in a public place where somebody sees you. You see what I mean?
For this policy, is it important that it be in there at all?
Is it important? Is that what you said? Is it
The
important?
personal relationship, is it
That's
important that it be in
what
there
I'm
at all?
saying. I would take it out.
I will say that the Constitution says consanguinity or affinity. It does not say marriage. So affinity can encapsulate more than marriage, while
Except-
marriage was typically it, because this was written,
Yeah, years and years and years.
Yes.
Except it appears we're trying to define it instead of leaving it nice and broad.
So maybe that's what we do, is you don't put through the definition of affinity. Do those definitions?
That would be my suggestion for that exact reason, because it's such a fluid document from a constitutional perspective. I personally would believe that that's the implication.
So then it would encompass everything.
Correct.
Everything we're talking about.
Correct.
Does that,
Yeah, but that seems really broad to me.
It
So we're
should be,
going to say
though.
by blood, and we understand what that means, right? That's set in stone when someone's born, whether they're by blood.
Right.
Then we're going to say affinity is any relationship that is not by blood. Right? Is that kind of what we're saying?
But if you do that, it's a little bit, it's a little bit more bendable, because then you can define it. They can come in and say, we've gotten married, one of us has to go, or somebody needs to promote, you know what I'm saying? Whereas versus, if we call everything out and we're detailed, then I just trying to get rid of the personal relationship, so.
And my concern is, like I said, if we just say blood is blood, we understand, and then relationships that are not blood, well, I have a relationship with you, I'm friends with you.
Right.
But that has nothing to do with that. You know what I mean? You can't just say a relationship that is not by blood. 'Cause that can include anything and everything.
Right.
And we don't want that. You know, if Cindy and I were roommates,
Well, I believe the hope here is if we just were to say that broadly, and then we were to have, say, this table, and then define it a little more holistic, or, narrowly, then we can not put ourselves into a corner if we were to have to implement,
right, so
put
that's why I'm
policy
saying
into place.
sticking with what we have, which is we have affinity is defined as not by blood to include by law and marriage.
But I think what the hope here would be, it would not to be defined it that way, so that we could have it a little more broad.
So what would your suggested language be? Maybe I'm not following.
Just leave all that red out. Just do
Correct.
affinity.
Correct.
Is that, but you're afraid that's not,
That's really broad. I mean, we have a
But that-
relationship, we're friends.
Right.
But does that mean we shouldn't work on the same shift or same department?
But
No.
I think if we were then to define it by the table, it then it would allow for us to be able to follow policy if we were to have to determine what to do in a certain case.
Okay, so you're saying like you would take the table of consanguinity and affinity and add things like in-laws, adopted children, you would add all that stuff, all the in-laws and guardianship and all that, you would add that to this table.
If that's that way it could be more broad in the definitions, and we could do it that way, sure.
Then I'm just back to, I guess I'm back to just leaving it the way it is. Affinity, consanguinity, we've got the examples there, we've got the table there, personal relationship, take it out.
Sounds good to me. Do you have the list of the original definitions? It's on, it's not on the new one,
oh,
is it?
So look on the one that was just handed out, and I'll explain to you how I came to this document. And this is just mine, so this is not what they suggested, this is just what
okay.
yes, this is just what I am talking through. So, see here, it used to be affinity, by blood, by law, by marriage, consanguinity, personal, and relative, right? Well, by blood, we don't need to say by blood when consanguinity refers to blood relationship. We don't need to say by blood again. And so I said, okay, let's combine that so that consanguinity refers to the blood relationship between two people from a common ancestor to include the very things that are all listed under by blood. And then affinity says refers to relationships that are not related by blood, that are by law, to include by law or marriage. And then I put all those things in there. So I got rid of by law, by marriage, and by blood by moving them under affinity or consanguinity. Like, we don't need to say that you got blood and then we got blood. You see what I mean?
Right.
But I'm not married to that. If you want to keep all those definitions, that's fine. Personal relationship, I don't think should be in there at all. And then I changed relative to say relative is any person associated by capital affinity, capital sanguinity within the fourth degree. So you got the definitions of the two things, you got what a relative is considered, and then you got your table, and then we go on to discuss hiring, supervising, and marriage. That's why that portion is just try to clean it up. Why would you list blood twice?
Well, the only reason consanguinity is in the original one is for very extended family. So you're a member of the extended Kennedy clan. You have the same great-great-grandfather, say.
Right.
And what do you do? Well, it depends on the family. Sometimes you just share the name. Sometimes you go ask Grandpa
Right.
before you do something.
Right.
And it didn't really lean on anything in consanguinity. It just said fourth degree, so I don't know that it has to be in there. It
The
just,
fourth degree part,
but it is
right?
different than just by blood, because the by blood defines, you have you're not the third cousin 14 times removed. Consanguinity, you do share genes.
Right, and that's why we only go down to the fourth degree.
Yeah.
We don't go to the.
So
eighth, ninth.
consanguinity may need to be in there or not be in there, but,
But that's what they're saying, this Constitution.
well, relative is fine with me. I don't need by blood or consanguinity, because if you say relative, it includes marriage.
Well, I think if we want to use the word relative, like supervision by relatives I think that's fine, as long as we say that relative means any person who is associated by affinity or consanguinity.
And just go to the next page, just to kind of bring home how I got to some of this, is on the very last page where it says note. I said, this is just the exact language, I just copied it out of the charter and plunked it over here, just so I could have it for reference, obviously. So, I mean, that is it there where it talks about affinity and consanguinity, and talks about the fourth degree, and, you know, what happens and all of that. So, to me, that's all laid out in the charter that's in effect today. And if the charter is going to be amended, we'll know in August, after the election. And then if we have to change things then, we change it then. But today, this document is based on the charter, which states consanguinity, affinity, and fourth degree, and does not mention personal relationships.
So we just do the word affinity, we do the say that, Arthur, say that word.
Consanguinity? So think sanguine,
Sanguine, consanguinity, blah, blah.
consanguinity.
Yeah,
So why couldn't we just say that? Affinity and.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and leave out, we don't have to have any of those up there for a definition. You do your table, and if you want to add in husband, wife, I mean, I think that's pretty well understood. I mean, if you're
And
married
it's
to
included
somebody.
in there. It's
Yeah.
included, and under affinity, I said, those
Yeah.
related by law or marriage.
But I'm saying, why couldn't we take that language out? Refers to, why do we have to have that?
Well, we have to define affinity if it's going to be, we got to define affinity. Affinity.
But then that goes back to where we're having a problem with the relationship part, you know,
Right.
the cohabitation. And like what we're discussing, they can be living together, have children together, and have no desire to ever get married.
Right, which is a completely different situation, I guess, than if two people start dating.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we can keep in the personal relationship part if that's what you want. I think it gets really hairy.
I would prefer that that's just not even in there. But if you want to, that's why I'm saying affinity has to be very broad and not be specific, because we're putting in the word marriage.
But we're saying to include.
Yeah.
So to include doesn't mean.
It doesn't mean that
this is
it
it
has
and
to be
that's
this
it,
or that.
you
Okay.
know. Yeah.
Okay. So Arthur, what were you saying? Say it again. You just say affinity. What was your suggestion?
Is anybody lost?
Yes, I'm totally
I
lost.
am too.
I think that the original definitions are okay if you just get rid of personal relationship.
Okay, there you
Yes.
go.
Okay, so our recommendation then would be to cross out, get rid of personal relationship, right?
Correct.
Can I throw a wrench into this just with
Sure.
an example?
Yep.
What happens if there's a supervisor of some sort, management, whatever that is, getting into a relationship with a subordinate? What do we do if it's not in policy?
It's not
Maybe there needs to be a
nepotism,
policy.
but it isn't good. Where do you put it? Do we not have a policy?
Well, we won't if we don't have it in here.
Most places
We didn't have
do
it
not
here before.
allow
I realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
relationships that are vertical in the organization.
But that's not considered nepotism. That's not nepotism if he or she is engaging with someone in their department, correct? That only becomes nepotism if,
Well, it could be if we utilize affinity. That's the whole point of
So what they're
affinity.
trying to, what they're wanting to do is say, if we find out that
you're dating someone in your
regardless of
department.
whether you're here, she's here, you're here to get, like same level, whatever, that's not allowed.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
That is not at all what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I
So
am
now I'm
saying
confused.
is, in certain, again, this isn't a blanket policy to say yes or no. What I'm saying is we need to have guidelines and parameters to nepotism. If you're peers and you're dating, that's not typically an issue, right? But if there's a hierarchy structure, there needs to be guidelines to that, because that could be a potential issue.
If you're directly supervising.
If you're supervising in any chain of command, that could be an issue. Just like it would be, should you be married or related? That could be an issue. It definitely could be an issue. There's no question. It's a policy that is typical in other organizations. This is very, very common across other organizations and companies. Am I wrong?
No, it is
Okay.
common.
And that's what affinity is there for. That is the common definition of affinity, especially in today's culture.
So we're leaving the word affinity there. Are you just saying that we need to,
Include the words about a personal relationship.
or take out that whole definition? What, I'm not following.
All I'm saying is if we pigeonhole specifically to certain individuals or certain things, or we keep out of a definition in some way, we just need to be aware that we'll be cornering ourselves as an organization to not be able to enforce policy in certain situations, and that's going to become an issue at some point in time. And I would rather do it now when we don't have a situation, because I do not want to create policy based on a situation. That is the worst way to run an organization. So I'm stating it now because it will become a situation at some point in time.
So what you're saying then is the affinity should not have any definitions linked to it.
If we define it in some way, it needs to be broad enough to encompass all that we're discussing here.
Okay.
Does that make sense, what I'm
Yes,
saying?
but
Okay.
if we say the words nepotism, this is the definition, affinity, that CONS, and we leave out the word relative because that's really discussed up in infinity, isn't that broad enough?
I'll defer to legal on that particular.
Can you say that again?
So it's because I don't know the words.
No, that's okay.
Just use consang for that word.
Consang, okay, so definitions, so this is the definition of nepotism. Affinity, that means relationship, and then the cons related to by blood. If we just say those two words, we don't have to define, we don't have to say it has to be a husband or a step-parent or whatever, and then if we go down in here and put this table here, couldn't we put in there somewhere?
Examples of affinity?
Example, like cohabitation or something? Or are we better off just to leave the table out? I mean, you guys got,
I
I'm
think
really
the table is included mostly because the fourth degree is sometimes hard for people to
Okay.
visualize what that is, so it just,
And it's all relatives.
And it's really all consanguinity.
It's not affinity. Well, it's not consanguinity if you include in-laws, your sister
Right, but in this-
and your brother-in-law.
In this box,
Yeah, but we
Yeah.
say
in this
table
box,
of,
it's table of this
I know.
and this, and it's
Yeah.
not that.
So the original definition for affinity says relationship, especially by marriage, as opposed to blood ties. That's nice and broad.
but again, it says marriage, and it doesn't address what she's saying about,
It says especially by marriage.
so that's the,
Relationship, especially by marriage, as opposed to blood ties.
so that's the out.
Somebody worked hard on this and did a pretty good job originally.
Okay. I totally understand all of it. I understand it can be blood, it can be marriage, but it can also be, as I was saying, the example of people that are cohabitating, happily cohabitating, don't ever want to get married and have children, because they will put them on their insurance. You know, they're both working somewhere in the city, and so I understand.
So if you start defining relationship as a sexual relationship,
Yeah, and I would
you
not.
get into departments where people are pointing.
Yes,
you
I
know,
would not,
And you don't want that.
I don't want that
But if
word.
you've got a definition of affinity that could include, and says especially by marriage, since that's what they're approximating with that type of relationship long-term, you've got a leg to stand on
Okay.
without
even
giving
if they're not
people
married.
ammunition just to poke at their coworkers.
Even if they're not married, how do you feel about that language?
I think that the affinity definition is broad enough to include a marriage or a relationship between two individuals that are not married.
Okay.
Okay, and when I read this, I don't get that. I read affinity refers to relationship, two people not by blood, include those related by law or marriage. Or whether you lay it out in the other things. But personal relationship, in whatever term, whether it's just cohabitating, is not used, again, anywhere in this policy. So it doesn't even, I don't even understand where it fits in.
I believe we should take it out. I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
I feel like, to Board Member Freeland's point, we should just utilize affinity in that regard, where it says relationship, especially by marriage, as opposed to blood ties. I think that covers it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, actually, I suggested that we use all of the original
Red?
definitions with the exception of personal relationship, which we should drop.
Agreed.
Have you got the original ones in front of you? Everything you have has red on it.
The original, my original copy from 2013, no, I do
So
not have.
this is the page he's speaking of. I think it's,
Page 14 of 73 from
Yeah.
last time.
And the newest is in front of you. It's
And is it in today's too?
today's, yes.
and you're saying you would leave by blood, by law, by marriage?
I don't know that
Or
they're
would
all
you-
necessary,
or you
but
would
they
take
are
them
all reasonable definitions.
Or you just say,
And I married those into the other one.
Right.
Like, why would we say it again? Why would we say,
Well-
consanguinity refers to a blood relation between two ancestors or whatever?
Well,
And then
and-
go and say again, by blood.
But you said to include, which essentially means to limit when you do it that way, and do specific relationships up to the fourth degree.
To me, to include, well, for consanguinity, I said refers to blood relationship between people from common ancestor to include, and then I listed all the same things that I crossed out under the by blood.
So, and this is, again, just a usage thing. Normally, to include redefines the original term. If you put including, then...
That's fine. To me, to include means it includes this. It doesn't say that includes everything. That's not the full list, but it does include that. But if you say that, so
Just
including.
instead of to include in
Change it
your
to-
change to just including.
Okay.
and you're
And
going
that-
to take out, and when you're referring to this one, then, are you wanting to take out the word by blood, by law, by marriage?
I'm voting to do that.
And you're wanting to put it, you're just going to use the word affinity, and you're going to use the word constant, whatever,
Consanguinity.
and then relative, any person by affinity,
That needs to stay.
yeah. So you're just going to have 3.
If you use the definition that includes marriage somewhere,
This one here.
where it says especially by
On page 14,
marriage.
it says affinity, relationship, especially by marriage as opposed to blood ties. So you leave that one. You take out the word by blood, by law, by marriage, and then you use the word consanguinity, and the personal relationship is gone, and then relative.
Yes, that's what I have on my sheet here.
But we're going to take out the words "refers to the relationship between not related to blood." Is that correct?
Why would we take that out?
I'm, my,
I'm not- like,
my-
I'm not- I just- I don't
my
understand.
question, okay.
I think,
I'm just trying to make sure Arthur and all three
Right.
of us are on the same page when
So-
it comes to that.
I guess the one thing, I'm trying to envision it, as you say, does it include in-laws?
Yes. Her
That's-
definition over here on this piece of paper includes in-laws. Over here, you'd have to leave in the word by marriage then.
I think
that's-
those are all pretty common definitions for an nepotism policy. I don't, it offers people who are reading this a little bit more information that, oh, that's what they mean by blood, and that's what they mean by
Right.
law, and that's what they mean by marriage. I don't think it hurts anything to leave them in there.
To leave this like this, are you speaking of this one or this one? I think that's why I'm so,
It's the same.
It's the
The only
same.
thing that's different is the
it's
one-
been included underneath affinity. That's
Well,
what you-
all I was referring to is the bigger packet and the one you have there are the same in terms of what you're looking at.
Okay.
So, if you want to use the definition that Laura's come up with for consanguinity, then you can drop out the by blood, right?
that's what I'm trying to consolidate.
Okay.
Why are we talking about blood twice?
Okay, do we
You know?
need by law then?
I included that, I moved that to my affinity paragraph.
Yeah, except we don't want to get too specific with affinity. At least I like the one that's already in there.
It says relationship especially by marriage as opposed to blood ties.
Okay, so then if you're not going to include by law under affinity, then you're going to have to change the definition of relative to any person associated by affinity or consanguinity or by law.
I think the understanding is that by law is included in relationship.
Correct.
By marriage would be by law.
By law.
Because marriage is law.
Right, and that's affinity. That's why I put it all under affinity. I
Well-
still don't
But
understand
it's
why
not
that.
affinity.
The
Necessarily.
in-laws are included under the by marriage if we use the original one.
Okay, so I think what we're going to need to do, because I'm kind of lost into what we're trying to accomplish. So let's have you guys rewrite what you think we should have.
I mean, honestly, if it's what I think we should have, I think we just have affinity and I mean, I don't think that's the right way to do it, because it's not, I wouldn't do it the same way personally, so that's probably not the best approach. I think we need to determine what you all want.
I think that Arthur's idea about affinity relationship, especially by marriage, as opposed to blood ties, is a great way of encompassing.
I agree.
Everybody. The people that are cohabitating and any kind of an issue they may have with.
Correct.
In a department. And then, if I get this correctly, we don't have to say who all those people are if we do the table.
The table doesn't list spouses, it doesn't list children. I mean, it lists children as in you're having children, but
Okay.
you also have stepchildren and all those things, and that's why you've got the by law in there.
So,
But you reference, in the document, not mine, this one, you guys reference, you say by law, guardianship relationships and adoptive parent relationships. You've said affinity, you've defined it, you've got, if you get rid of the other by blood, you've got the table.
Yeah. You
By
can-
law
you could get
is
away-
affinity.
I
By
think-
marriage is affinity.
What if we defined affinity as a relationship, especially by marriage or law, as opposed to by blood? And then we use all of those definitions. We include the by marriage and by law
in there.
in the definition of affinity, and we separate that as separate from by blood.
Okay, and so does what you just said similar to what I have on this one with the green sheet? Or not?
Yes. it is.
Okay.
And it just breaks that up, it breaks it up a little bit more. So what it does is it includes affinity by blood, by law, by marriage.
She said something else, didn't you, by law, by blood?
I said relationship, especially by marriage or by law, as opposed to by blood.
Yeah. And the thing that, when you say by law, this guardianship relationships, that may not be somebody that you're related to, because I happen to know of someone that's a guardian for a really good friend. So by law would encompass that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm totally
If
fine
it was
by having the by law phrase if you refer to it in one of the other definitions, because relative is only defined as affinity or consang, period,
But if we include by law in affinity,
which is what I did. Yeah. That's what I-
yes, but I think we can just amend this top definition here too, if we're going with these definitions.
Okay, so what would you say? Affinity is going to be the,
Relationship, especially by marriage or by law, as opposed to by blood. And
okay, and then you're not going to list out guardianship, adopted,
not within that definition,
But
no.
by
just
law,
not including examples, is what you're saying.
Those are in the definition then of by blood, by law, or by marriage.
I just don't, okay, that's fine. We just don't, I don't, why do we have to have 4 or 5 lines when we could have 2 or 3 with relative?
So if you just put in by marriage, is it clear enough that that includes all your in-laws? Not just your wife?
Well, and that's why then the definition of by marriage has the different in-laws. I think when you start trying to combine a lot
So
of
you
terms
do
into
put
one
that-
definition, it gets a little difficult sometimes. So if we can take just each word separately, that helps it a little bit.
so you're going to leave that in there then, by blood. So it'll say affinity, and then you're going to leave all these in there?
Yes, I would. That would be my
Okay.
recommendation.
Okay, then I would like to have you please type that up language and send it out to us.
Sure.
So we can move on to the other parts of this, because I want to see it in writing, because I'm confused as to exactly what we're saying, as far as whether we're putting examples, we're not putting examples. This table of consanguinity and affinity, that, I don't even think it should say and affinity, because I don't see anything there that's affinity unless you're talking about stepchildren, or you're talking about adopted children. To me, this table is all about the blood relationship. Is that true or not?
Oh, I think it is. I think we could add step to many of these definitions, or many of these examples. You could just put step in front of children in parentheses. It is your
Yeah.
stepchild or your child.
Right. And daughter-in-law and sister-in-law and brother-in-law and all of that. So if we want to keep the table, then we beef it up for all the examples of blood and affinity.
If it's in the definition above, and if you would prefer to take the table out, that's
Fine with me.
perfectly acceptable as well.
Fine
We
with
just
me.
would need a quorum to do
Yeah,
that.
And it's not something that changes. It's always the 4th degree. These are always those relationships. So you can always look it up, Google it and find the table and figure it out.
And I've said all along, I don't see the point of the table, so.
The table could go, I have no.
Okay, table's gone, and we don't have to even discuss the title of it. Okay, so,
So there's one thing you didn't add, and that's to use your definition for consanguinity in the handout from today.
say that one more, in the handout from today,
Yeah, the definition of consanguinity, do we need that or not need that?
Well,
yeah, it says refers to the blood relationship between people from some common ancestor to include or including.
including.
But we can take out all that. We don't have to, if we don't have to list, then we don't have to make examples, that's fine.
So I'd be happy with that either way, but I do think the common ancestor thing is a good thing to have in there, even if we can't say consanguinity.
Refers to the, yeah, so you
Okay.
leave the definition, but you take out the listing of who those are, right?
Yeah.
If-
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what I've said all along is, if you're related by blood, you're related by blood. And I think probably even at the 4th degree, when you're talking about great-great-grandchildren, that kind of thing, you're getting so far out on the family tree that one person has to be this age and one has to be this age, and they can't possibly be working for the city at the same time. You know what I mean? It just goes so far out. But if anybody can look up within the 4th degree, then we don't list it. Like I said, just take that out. Take out, just say by law, or just say affinity, what you said, no examples. Say consanguinity, what you said, no examples. And then relative. Relative ties those two together.
I would suggest that if we're including by marriage, by law, and by blood in the definition of affinity, that we also define those. It's just helpful information for people to see it there real fast and understand where to go.
Okay, so then we're back to the language that I have, which is consanguinity refers to a blood relationship from common ancestor, including parent, child, blah, 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 is what you're saying. You would keep those examples.
But I think she's saying she'd rather see it broken out like that.
Yes.
Instead of in the paragraph. Because it gives it a little bit more leadway.
That's fine, that's fine. It's redundant to me, but it's been that way for a long time, so that's fine. Okay, so let's go down to, so we'll get some new reworded language on that. Okay. All hiring shall, on the one that I had her bring in, all hiring decisions shall comply with the charter, nepotism 5.11, which states, and now I'm not saying this necessarily has to get in here, but I just wanted to make sure, and again, this is one of those things too, because if the charter changes, and we're going to have to take out the 5.11 anyway, and we're going to have to go in here and restate things about, under some ordinance or...
I wouldn't include a portion of the charter in here.
Yeah, just strike from all hiring decisions through which states.
Okay, and I'm good with that.
And then you've got the concept in there without referring to the
Okay, so yep. we
Charter.
would just do-
Which one are you on? Are you on the one that she handed out?
the new one
Okay.
that
And where are we striking
Laura
that?
did, the very bottom paragraph, first page, with a 2 in front of it.
Nepotism in hiring decisions will now say, all hiring decisions shall comply with Charter Section 5.11, comma, nepotism, period. Right?
No. Let's take out anything that says charter. Strike from all hiring through which states,
Oh,
and then it just starts neither the mayor or the members of the council.
oh,
It
I thought
says-
you were talking about taking out the language of the charter.
I would take out the language of the charter. I would not copy language from the charter and put it in anything else, because that does change, and we anticipate that, we don't know what will happen in August, but as of right now, we anticipate that it will be removed. So I wouldn't copy any language of the charter.
Okay, so
Yeah,
So-
you were saying that it would say, all hiring decisions shall comply with Charter Section 5.11, nepotism, period.
Yes, and yes, we will have to go back and maybe change some things to references to the charter, and that will be a citywide thing, so
Well,
it,
and this entire section, I mean, there's a different piece to the hiring portion of the personnel policy that dictates that the city manager has hiring authority. So I don't believe that this portion of the policy is necessary at all. I'm not quite certain why this has been added. Can you explain why?
I added it because I wanted it, not necessarily to stay in there, but I want us to keep in mind why things are the way they are, as far as things like the 4th degree or plural authority. It talks about the affinity and consanguinity. It talks about what happens if you go off and do something that you're not supposed to do. So it doesn't have to stay there. I'm fine with that. But when we're referring to it's going to mirror the 511, then we need to make sure the language mirrors 511.
But
Or whatever it turns into.
Which, if it's what it will turn into is nothing. It just disappears.
exactly, which is why I don't think it needs to be in there at all, because that dictates all things. The charter will dictate all things anyway, and I don't think we need to dial it in on the policy.
Okay, so then would you suggest, to Arthur's point, that nepotism in hiring decisions just has the phrase, whatever, discourages nepotism by prohibiting any city official or employee from participating in the hiring of a relative, period?
Well, I feel as though we address that further down in the policy provisions that we're talking about further down when we get into the other areas.
When you
That's the
talk
only
about,
one that addressed hiring. The
So I
others were
see, yeah.
supervision.
Hiring, supervision, and then by marriage is just hanging out there as like, if that ever happens, right? So we're separating hiring by saying, you can't do it. You can't be involved in the hiring of a relative as defined above.
That's fine.
Then that's all hiring says. Then it goes on to supervising.
That's fine.
right? Okay,
Which is on that original page 13 of 73.
right. So it'll just say
As number
nepotism and
one.
hiring
Exactly.
decisions.
Yes.
In fact, I wouldn't even say the city discourages it. I would just say the city prohibits any city official or employee from participating in the hiring of a relative.
Yeah, it puts nepotism in the mix, but it is a little redundant, because it's the title of the section.
Yeah, yes, I would agree with that. But it kind of helps you to understand, like, okay, we're going to talk about hiring, now we're going to talk about supervising, and then we got that piece out there about marriage, which probably should be moved up when we're talking about relative, but, does that make sense? Mike,
So-
you look like you have a point too, I'm sorry.
So what are we talking about with nepotism and hiring decisions? What are we deciding here? Are we, obviously, we're taking section 511 out. But what was our decision?
So G1, nepotism in hiring decisions, :
Right,
the city prohibits or discourages nepotism by prohibiting any city official or employee from participating in the hiring of a relative.
Period.
okay.
Yep, I'm good with that.
and hopefully that means we won't have to revisit it.
Yes.
That it's broad enough.
Depending on whether the
Yeah.
charter changes or not. We
Yeah.
don't have any reference to the charter. Okay,
So then you're on to 3, supervision by relatives, correct?
yes. Okay,
Just a time check, it's 12:03.
oh my gosh, okay, yep. Check my schedule. I have a few extra minutes,
I have maybe 10.
okay, 10 more minutes.
Carl was the one that had the hard finish that made us say noon.
Yeah, and
I
I had
did-
to check to see if I scheduled a client after that.
I do have a meeting, but I can have them wait that 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got 10.
Okay, so
It's only the city manager, he can wait.
take that.
Tell me it was city, yeah,
But this is the most difficult topic, I think.
yeah.
Well, and this one to me, so I'm on the one that she sent out, supervision by relatives. No employee shall be employed, promoted, transferred, or reinstated into any position and shift where the employee will supervise directly or be supervised directly by a relative, period. Then you have that in case of emergency thing that covers, that's your safety net. If something happens because it was an emergency, then you can have them explain it. I don't see the need for the part about, which includes an employee being subordinate to a relative in the applicable organizational chart or chain of command. If you're a relative, you should not be supervised or be supervising somebody who's your fellow relative.
Are we looking at, what are we looking at?
Supervision by relatives.
Oh, so we've, okay.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me, but whichever one, we don't need that, we don't need the word about organizational chart or chain of command. It's directly supervised or directly supervised by
Any relative.
any relative.
Unless in an emergency situation,
Right.
there could be a natural disaster and,
And that's your safety net, where you say, okay, did you exhaust everything? Did you send every officer but the relative?
I'm the exhaust everything, because if it's a natural disaster, like there's a tornado that's come through, I don't know that you're going to be able to have time, you know?
I know, and that's why I personally think the emergency should say, you know, and it says, if this is not possible, then any decisions resulting from that situation will be subject to investigation. So doesn't mean you have to investigate it, but if it's like, whoa,
Okay,
we had a
okay.
situation.
I think that language is fine.
Okay.
I think
As long-
we need to take head-on the issue of supervision in the organization. So
Right.
if my boss is not related to me, but his boss is my father, that's okay?
Yes.
It's your direct.
That's the small-town solution.
Yes.
Because you can't get more than 2 degrees of separation. But it's not ideal, because everybody else in the department thinks you're getting special treatment.
That is where I have a very big problem. I'm just going to state that. We're a 1,200-person organization. We're the 5th largest city in the state. There are policy and salary, compensation, all the things where an individual will have direct authority over those individuals' livelihood. So, to your point, that's going to be an issue, okay? And think about it like this. If that individual is in the police department and there is a sergeant on staff, and that sergeant's hurt, that captain comes in. Let's take that from a safety issue. That captain comes in and is in charge on site. That captain now is in charge of that individual on site. And that captain is now telling their nephew, son, daughter, whatever, what to do in that emergency situation.
Yeah, an emergency is going to
That's-
happen. You know what I mean?
I
Blow things
understand.
out, you know what I mean? And then you have your safety net.
I understand.
Yeah.
So that's thing one.
That's safety.
I'm sorry?
That's safety.
That's a
And that
safety
includes
issue.
morale.
That's a safety issue. You're going to have people with video cameras. You're going to have press there. You're going to have knee-jerk decisions that are happening. So therein lies one issue. Now, let's take that out of the picture. You have policy that these individuals are going to be deciding. For the individuals that they are in direct line of supervision of. And that is going to be an issue down the road. My mom, my dad, whomever is going to be making these decisions for me. That is a morale issue. That is an issue that will come up at some point in time in a legal matter, in a policy decision-making situation, whether we want it to or not. It is going to come up. And yes,
Promotion,
when they're
compensation.
exactly, and when
But we
we
have safety checks for all of
but we
that.
don't. If they're going to
Don't you
be,
have to sign off on all promotions? Someone in HR has to sign off on all promotions and
but
hiring?
that doesn't stop. I mean, that individual. What am I going to say?
You're related to.
Right, and if
that,
I don't
so
have
you're
a
not gonna-
policy to fall back on, what am I going to do?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You'll have a policy.
No, I won't. Because if they're not in the direct chain of command, then I don't have a policy to fall back on because they're not their direct supervisor. If they're one person away from them, then I don't have a policy to say, well, you don't have the authority to make that decision.
I guess I'm not following. So if we have two people that are related, right? And they directly supervise each other, that's a problem. And that's what we're talking about, right?
Nope.
So you only have one direct supervisor.
That's
But
not
your
what I'm
direct
talking about.
supervisor has a supervisor,
I know,
potentially.
But we've, and this is.
Can I, which part of this section 3 are we talking about? Are we talking about?
Supervision by relatives.
I know, I understand that. Are we talking about which includes an employee being subordinate to a relative in the applicable organizational chart or chain of command? Or are we talking about emergencies?
We're not talking about emergencies. We're
Okay.
talking about
Chain of command.
the chain of
Okay.
command.
So what I'm saying is, so let me throw out an example and see if this is what you're thinking.
Okay.
Okay. So we got a firefighter whose dad is a BC, battalion chief. Are we saying that those two cannot both work both in the fire department?
It depends on the situation.
Okay, so in that situation, with that situation, can they?
It depends on the situation.
Okay,
I
so how
can't
do
just
we
answer
write
that
it
blanketly.
depends? How do we write all the "it depends" in here?
And to tell her what the chain of command would be in that situation, how many people are between them, and what power does the battalion
And
commander have?
every department's going to put that list together.
Yes, that's how it is now. They have a hierarchy chart.
No, I know they have I know they have that chart. I mean, I understand that. But we, just like I said, Mark Carrick was the deputy chief and his son was down here. Mark could not make specific decisions about Josh.
Yeah, they could, because when we have a
And if you found out
pre-disciplinary...
about it, you'd be like, whoa, wait a minute. That was not an emergency situation.
Did he have to sign off on those decisions?
Yes, the pre-disciplinary hearings are always signed off by the deputy chief, and that's where I'm saying that's a problem.
So then you say, okay, well, the deputy chief can do the same things that the chief can do, so we're going to put this situation, because it's his child, under the chief.
But I can't do that based on what you're saying with this policy and the way it's written. I
Okay.
can't do that.
Okay, so my concern is, then I want to see what you mean by all these, because right now, we have, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, 8 or 10 relationship situations where one's on A shift, one's on B shift, they don't supervise each other, one's a battalion chief, one's a firefighter. This battalion chief is not going to deal with this person unless there's an emergency, in which case all hell breaks loose, and we do everything we can just to get work done, and then we can talk about it afterwards.
All right, so
So
I realize that,
you know,
there's that you've had a conversation with the fire department. That's quite obvious, right? I, too, have had a conversation with the union and the fire department,
okay,
and we've talked this out. This has been discussed, and this has been decided. Those individuals move to different shifts,
right.
and there is a gray area that we can work around if we write the policy the way it's written already. We've already discussed it.
So, and this would be, this page in here?
Yes, ma'am.
I think we're getting at two different things. I think that it's direct supervision. I understand your point about 1 step up, 2 steps up, 3 steps up, 4 steps up, but we got to get all of that written out so that it is.
But if we write
very
it too specifically, then we're going to get ourselves into a situation where we won't be able to have that gray area and work around it from a logistics standpoint. Again, you can't write policy around certain situations, otherwise we'll be hurting ourselves as an organization to work with the employees. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense, but that's
Yeah.
why, to me, I just think it should just be direct supervision. I think that says that's what it is. I mean, that's what we've done for years.
I realize that's what
And
we've
if
done
we-
for
if
years, but
we-
that's also the problem, right? Because to Board Member Freeman's point, that's why we have the problems of creating a morale issue and a policy decision-making issue, because if I have a family member making decisions on compensation, disciplinary issues, all of those other things for the department, that's a problem.
So I'm kind of simplistic, and let me tell you how this feels to me, because they don't even have to be making those decisions. If you're in an organization and your nephew is 2 levels down, and he gets a good performance review and he gets a promotion, some of his coworkers are going to think it was your influence. So if you exert any effects, you tend to have to tamp your relatives down so they don't get anything that even appears like preferential treatment, no matter how hard they work.
Right.
So it's the perceptions of the coworkers that really become the issue. And if daddy's in the hierarchy and you start going up the ladder faster than anybody else, what do they think? They don't think that you worked hard and you did the best job you could possibly do. They think you're getting preferential treatment.
But are we here to, it's not the right word to use, but like, it's this conspiracy theory that, oh yeah, he got promoted because his dad was
It
there.
doesn't have to be a theory or conspiracy theory.
I
All
mean,
it has to do is have people
That's
whispering in the
perception.
background and have a bad perception, and it hurts the morale of everybody.
But it also creates a liability on the city, is what it really does. Because if we don't have policy in place to keep us safe from a liability issue that could come up, and a lawyer to say, from an employment standpoint, this happened, then we've opened ourselves up to liability, and it's our responsibility to keep that liability from happening.
Okay, so you're saying that there's no concern then with the way it's written?
I mean, it's my personal
department
perception.
heads,
In the department. yeah.
and the Labor Coalition is fine with having that in there,
So I had the conversation with the coalition, now it's been several months,
okay?
and we'll have a hearing on this, obviously, before we go, and they can speak to it, and I will defer to legal in terms of the way it's written in the red line. But
I'm satisfied with it. I think it appropriately covers what we've been talking about, is that if two people are equal employees, cool, we don't care. But if they are in that chain of command that comes down, that is not allowed.
Okay, so then our understanding, so then you're saying that it's not allowed. So if we were to implement this as written, what would you do with, and I'm not talking just about the fire department, I just know the fire department because I'm a paramedic. I don't understand all the hierarchy of the police department.
So-
Are you
so
gonna
in
go to
your
that
example of a
department and
battalion,
say,
if you're-
"You've got this going on, so now half of you have to go."
that is not what I'm saying. If I'm a battalion chief and if I have a fireman on my shift, those shifts have to split, which my understanding with speaking with the fire department is they do that already.
So they don't work underneath.
That's my understanding.
So we need to then, so again, that goes back to direct supervision. Like if Riley's over here and Bill's the battalion chief, Bill's on A shift and Riley's on B shift, then it doesn't matter. Is that what we're saying? In
It
which
does-
case, we have to add some shift language.
It doesn't matter till you get to the top.
We don't have to add the shift language because it's already, we want to make this more broad so that it can be handled at the department level.
Right, you couldn't put shift in there because you might have, like people at Power and Light or the water department, so they don't necessarily call their shift work, do they? They don't, do they?
Well, my point is, I'm trying to ask the question of, if we adopt this as written, what's truly going to happen then?
There's several remedies in there. It's pretty well crafted.
So what would happen then?
If someone is promoted to where they have somebody in line beneath them that's a relative, that person is given opportunities to transfer to a similar job or similar level. And it looked to me like it's bend over backwards to try and help that to happen, because it's not their fault.
Right, so if you have, I think we need to stop, because I gotta go, we gotta go anyway, and you've got a meeting. But what I'm asking is, if we put this policy in place, and it's not just the direct supervision, then you're gonna ask the departments, I need to know all of the people that are related by blood or by affinity, right? And you gotta go down the list, and you're like, okay, in the chain of command, BCs are above firefighters. So that's the chain of command. If you don't have shift in there, then BCs are all above all captains, captains are above all FAOs, are above all firefighters, right? So you're gonna have a list of how many situations do we have in the fire department, in the police department, in IPL, all of those, right? And then you're gonna make individual decisions based on something. And it's not gonna be direct supervision. For some people, it's gonna be, you're really high in the organization, so you can't have any relatives below you. But you're in the middle of the organization, I mean, those are the decisions you're gonna have to make, right?
Those are policy decisions that you'll entrust the HR department and the managers to manage. Those are the logistics that the policy.
Right. So I'm trying to get at what they're going to do, because what I see from this is there are going to be people who are going to have to be let go.
That is not what the intent is, and that is not what will happen.
Okay, then we got that on record, then that's not what's going to happen.
So, just to clarify, you want to be able to retain the employees
Of
that are
course.
on staff now.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Because obviously you don't want a policy to go out there and go, okay, because that would just be talk about morale. That would be not so great. Okay.
Of course not.
Okay, so is,
I move we adjourn and potentially make a
second that.
decision on this next time.
okay. And when do we want to schedule our next meeting? Before we
We have
adjourn?
it for the
we've-
14th.
We've got
Of
the,
June.
Do we want to try
whatever
to
it's
tag it on
called.
with the hearings then?
We can if you'd like, sure. We'll put it on old business, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll do hearing first, so that we get everybody out who's not there, and then,
And it's when is that one? June the 14th?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
and where's it?
It'll be here because it's booked in IUC already. The room is booked again.
What do you call this room? I see.
No, IUC, utilities,
that's where we were last time.
This is
That.
City Hall conference room now.
Okay. And what do you call the utility one? I'm sorry.
IUC.
IUC. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get that language that
Yeah,
it's,
that's the Independence Utility Center, until it becomes a police department, because the utility center's moving.
My motion's about to die for lack of a second.
second that.
Well, if you, before the adjournment is the scheduled meeting.
Well,
so
we
I'm
don't have
trying
to vote
look
on
at
it yet.
I'm trying to look at my calendar to make sure I got that on there. We said the 26th? 20, what day?
The 14th.
14th of
Not all the
June.
way down there, okay.
At ICU.
Okay, and it's going to be
And,
okay.
and I want to ask a question. When I come to this room, I just have to find somebody to let me
Yep.
in or
Just
knock?
yeah. Somebody will come, they'll know we're coming, and somebody will come out.
The front window there, somebody will let you in.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Just to confirm, the next meeting is here in this room.
Okay.
Okay,
It's been made and seconded, we can just vote on it now.
all in favor say bye.
Bye.
All right, good talk.
It's a lot to go through and to
And we had
understand.
decided 9 for that one, for the hearing,
9.
on the 14th.
Thank you.
Okay, and then at City Hall. Okay. All righty. Thank you.
A little resource.
I appreciate that, because I'm so confused on that. I haven't gotten into that yet.
What one?
It's a detection of drugs and oral fluid.
Oh, my.
That drug and alcohol thing is so confusing.
Well, it really, you know what? Thank
you.
Bye, thank you, Jamie. I know that we probably, but I will just, I don't know.
Me?
Yeah.
Lindsay.
Lindsay, I'm sorry.
I just think you have to take, I hate to do this, but I think you have to take a hard line in the sand with that, with the marijuana and the alcohol. It just
I
has,
don't even know what to think on that yet. I really just, I haven't read through it.